Eva Humphreys here. I'm a banned registered nutritionist and I have teamed up with Good Hemp for a series of educational videos. This one looks at a few nutritional factors that may help with sleep. Our sleep is influenced by two main hormones, melatonin and cortisol. Melatonin is our sleep hormone. This is the bit that gets us sleepy, helps us fall asleep and stay asleep. I wanted to take a look at a few nutritional tips that may help melatonin production. And there's also a little bit on cortisol later on. Here is an overview of what we'll be looking at, namely the amino acid tryptophan, zinc, magnesium, vitamin C, and B vitamins. First up, we have tryptophan. Tryptophan is the main ingredient in melatonin. Tryptophan is an amino acid which we derive from protein. So the very first step in this is to ensure that you're getting enough protein in your diet. The current recommended daily intake for protein is 45 grams a day for women and 55 grams a day for men, but this may change dependent on activity levels. The more exercise you do, the more protein you may need. The second step is to get specific foods that contain the amino acid tryptophan. There isn't a specific RDA for tryptophan, but we know we need somewhere around 250 to 425 milligrams per day. There are many foods that contain tryptophan, namely turkey, that little known one that produces good sleep, and also chicken. There are some plant-based sources, including hemp seeds, which contain 370 milligrams per 100 grams, and also hemp protein, which clocks in at around 270 milligrams per 25 gram portion. Once we manage to get enough protein and enough tryptophan-containing ingredients into our diet, there are a couple of factors which can influence how much of that tryptophan we physically use. One is carbs. We like carbs a lot because carbs can really increase the amount of tryptophan available to the brain. So if you eat carbs and protein in the same meal, we'll be able to use more of that tryptophan in a way that promotes sleep. On the other end of the spectrum, there are certain things that can steal tryptophan from us. One is the immune system, if there's a lot of inflammation going on. Another is stress, our gut microbes, and then also prolonged exhaustive endurance exercise. The more we exercise, the more protein we need. So that latter one makes sense. Our gut microbes are a little more complex. There is a separate video on the topic of gut microbes, but in a nutshell, they can both promote tryptophan and they can also steal it from us. It just depends on how they feel. Let's pretend we've managed to get enough tryptophan into our diet. Now we need to convert it to our sleep hormone melatonin. This shows how that conversion happens. Yes, it looks incredibly confusing, but what I really wanted to draw your attention to is those blue tabs. The blue tabs highlight all of the nutrients required for us to be able to take tryptophan and make it into melatonin. Those nutrients are folate, vitamin B6, zinc, magnesium, and vitamin B12. And we're going to take a closer look at each of those now. First up, we have B vitamins. These are folate, vitamin B6, and vitamin B12. The main source for vitamin B12 is meat protein, but it is not in all meat protein. For example, chicken breast contains none, whereas darker meat proteins contain more. One consistently good source for vitamin B12 is eggs. 3 eggs contain almost all of the daily recommended intake of vitamin B12 for the day. Plant-based diets are much lower in B12. In fact, it's really hard to obtain enough B12 on a plant-based diet. One good source is nutritional yeast. Folate comes from leafy greens. Two of the highest sources would be watercress and cabbage, but any leafy greens will do a trick. This one is really easy to integrate. Just throw a handful of greens on anything you may be eating. Hemp seeds also contain some folate. In fact, they contain 28% of the recommended daily intake per 100 grams. Then we are on to magnesium, and I really wanted to focus in on magnesium because the vast majority of us are just not getting enough. It's really hard to get the right quantity of magnesium out of our diet because we need really large quantities of food to be able to achieve it. So for example, greens are one of the sources of magnesium, but we need almost 500 grams of spinach per day to get to the right level of magnesium for that day. Beans also contain it, but we need like 250 grams of beans per day to be able to get the right amount of magnesium just for a single day. Cocoa also contains some. Magnesium is vital to our sleep quality. In fact, it promotes deeper sleep. So this one is a really crucial one to get enough of. Luckily, hemp seeds are a superior source of magnesium. There are 700 milligrams per 100 gram of hemp seeds, which translates to twice the recommended daily intake for men and 1.6 times the recommended daily intake for women. Like magnesium, the mineral zinc is also pretty hard to obtain from our diet because not very many foods contain sufficient quantities of it. Coupled with this is the fact that guidelines for zinc intake are really confusing. Currently in the UK, the recommended daily intake of zinc is 9.5 milligrams a day for men and 7 milligrams a day for women. But if you look at recommended daily intakes in places like Asia and Australia, they are much higher, which begs the question, do we actually need more zinc than is currently recommended? A top source would be oysters, if you're into them. Oysters contain between 11 to 18 milligrams of zinc per 100 grams. One of the best plant-based sources, and arguably one of the best sources of zinc, is hemp seeds. They contain 9.9 milligrams per 100 grams. Vitamin C. Vitamin C doesn't directly get involved with the conversion of tryptophan to melatonin, but it does seem to play a supportive role. The study on the left-hand side on sleep duration showed that those who slept for fewer hours, these were people that slept for 5 hours or less, tended to also have low levels of vitamin C. Earlier, I mentioned that there are certain things that steal tryptophan, so we can't quite make as much of the sleep hormone melatonin. Vitamin C is an antioxidant, so it may prevent things like the immune system and stress stealing too much of that tryptophan. Vitamin C is plentiful in items like red peppers, berries, cherries, and citrus fruits. A couple of extra foods to highlight would be kiwis and sour cherries. Studies indicate that these contain compounds that may help us make more melatonin. Now that I have given you all of this information, let's just recap. Tryptophan is made from protein, so we need to ensure we get a sufficient quantity of protein. Next, we need zinc, which will come from things like hemp seeds and oysters. Magnesium, which hemp seeds are also a great source of, but they're also contained in greens and beans. B vitamins, namely eggs, greens, and pistachios. Vitamin C from red peppers, berries, and citrus fruits. And then 2 extra foods to add in the mix, kiwis and sour cherry. But there's a couple of extra nutritional factors to consider. You may have heard that eating late at night is not a great idea if you want good sleep. This is only partially true. It actually comes down to what you're eating as that last meal. Proteins and fats can take quite a long time to break down, up to 4 hours mostly, but sometimes a little bit longer depending on how much of it you've eaten. The last thing our body wants is for a lot of things to be sitting in the digestive system whilst we're asleep, so it will try and wake you up. Carbohydrates digest much quicker. In fact, they can digest in half an hour if they are simple carbs, to up to 2 hours for more complex versions. If there is nothing sitting in your digestive system, sleep is much better. So if you're having to eat late at night, reaching for carbs is a much better idea. The second but is around caffeine, but not completely in a traditional sense. I'm sure you'll know that having caffeine late at night is likely to raise cortisol, which promotes wakefulness. But there's a further aspect to this, and that aspect comes to having caffeine at first thing in the morning. Cortisol and melatonin work together. First thing in the morning, our cortisol is really high, which is what wakes us up, and our melatonin is really low. Melatonin would make us fall asleep, and we definitely do not want that in the morning. So instead, cortisol shoots up and replaces that sleep hormone. This is when caffeine might not be ideal. If you put caffeine in when cortisol is so high first thing in the morning, that cortisol shoots even further up. After a while, the body learns that caffeine is coming. So caffeine is associated with higher cortisol. The body knows this, so instead of producing such high levels of cortisol, it produces less, thinking, well, that coffee is coming in a bit anyway, which will make the cortisol shoot up, so I might as well just produce less cortisol for now. The net effect is that over time, we'll start waking up a bit more drowsy. But this also throws off the way that melatonin is produced. If cortisol isn't so high in the morning, melatonin might be produced earlier or much later, depending on how confused that cortisol-melatonin cycle becomes. A better time to have caffeinated beverages would be between that 12 and 4 o'clock window. If you look on the graph on the left-hand side, cortisol drops quite a bit between 12 and 4, which is when adding caffeine in can have more of a beneficial effect and less of a detrimental effect. That's all on the topic of sleep. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and don't forget to check out the rest of the videos in this series.